Okay, good morning everybody. We're starting Unit 1 today, and you can see the list of topics right at the top of the Unit 1 folder. We're going to go through talking about some essentials of hardware, software, and operating systems, talk about common computing platforms. We're also going to go through file management both on a local level and a cloud level, and there's an assignment attached to the file management stuff. And then we're going to use Blackboard Collaborate here in the classroom and interact with each other. And I don't know if you guys have ever done like a Google Hangout or with your friends or anything, and usually people will chat or video call each other. And that's really what this tool is. It fits right into that category, except the tool that we use more often within it is the screen sharing technology, and you'll see why as we get rolling. Okay, and that one will also have an assignment attached to it, the Blackboard Collaborate thing, and the beauty of you guys being in the classroom here today is once you sign into the classroom, I'll go into the gradebook, drop in your point, you don't really have to do anything else. The people that aren't here, right, they're going to actually have to make an appointment with me to log in and do it. So there's advantages to showing up. And that's actually not uncommon. Usually we teach this in what we call a stacked format where we have the online section too, and those people, I mean, they can't necessarily be in the classroom with us even live online because they're working or whatever their situation is, so we have to do it that way. All right, let's get rolling here. Now, I put this little thing here, the Explore Useful Links section, and I'm not bringing any of these up in class. I just provided these. This is kind of a list of resources that we kind of pool together with our other instructors. Wendy actually came up with a majority of these, but I checked them all out and I think they're pretty useful. Most of them are video links that just show you how to do stuff. You know, and I'm going to teach you ways that I think work well, but that might not work perfectly for you, right? And then the way I describe it might not resonate with you as well as maybe the way somebody else says it. And sometimes, you know, what I find is when we're in a classroom, you know, like the person sitting next to you might goes, what he means is this, right? And that's okay. And you're not hurting my feelings in the process. All right, so I want you to take the time at your leisure. It's not, there's no assignment attached to it, but if you need reinforcement on any of the stuff that's listed here, so there's a video on how to organize your files and folders in Windows 10, how to use the snipping tool. I kind of showed you that already, and I think it's fairly intuitive. But you know, if you're not watching, you know, you glance away for a second, you're looking at your phone, maybe you missed it. So there's a video on it, and then a couple basic concepts here on, you know, some of the operating systems and platforms that are out there, and then a little bit of information on, you know, connecting up to the outside world. Yes, John?
I just want to make sure the snipping tool, we use that to submit our homework on Blackboard.
Right. Well, and I want to make a disconnect for you. That's not the tool that submits your homework. That's the tool that captures images on your screen. And then what you do with that image, typically I'll ask you to put it in a Word doc, and then you submit that Word doc to Blackboard. And there's a methodology for that too. And I don't know if I explained this. It's really more for my convenience, because if you guys submit an image, it doesn't just pop up in Blackboard. I have to download it. Sometimes if there's more than one, I have to unzip it. You know, it's like a whole process. Where if you put it in a Word doc, I click on your assignment, boom, it's there. And that's the why. Okay. Some instructors get a little persnickety on it too. So.
Is it the same for rich text documents? Because I've been doing those just because I didn't have Word downloaded.
That's fine, but if you have a tool that's using rich text as an output, chances are it can save to Word as well.
Okay.
But RTF actually works.
Okay.
And most people don't even know what that is. That's kind of like an old school format for allowing fonts to be bold and italic. It's like a really basic Word format, and all word processors typically open it. But the standard out in the field, for as much as we love Google Docs and whatever, is still Word docs. Just so you guys know. Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about hardware platforms. And a lot of this is going to be audio, frankly. I'm not really going to do a lot of stuff on screen. But you guys all know what computer hardware is, if I say that? Somebody explain to me what computer hardware is.
Yeah, everything inside of it, so your processor, your RAM, motherboard.
Okay. So like the physical box. Would my phone constitute hardware?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? It's a physical device. My mouse is a physical device. That's hardware, right? Not the hardware you go to and buy at the hardware store, but you know, the actual physical computing items. Software, conversely, are the instructions that we give to the computer to tell it what to do. So this sounds like a repeat from Python class, right, you guys? And I maybe there belabored it a little bit more, but that becomes really important when you become a programmer. We are working actually at a much higher level than that. So we make the assumption as web developers that people have a computer of some sort, or a phone, or a tablet, or whatever, that can connect to the internet, so they have the hardware and the software, it's already running. We're just creating the content that goes on that screen. And really, as web programmers, you need to think really carefully that we are creating actually software applications that just run through a web interface. And that's kind of a big thing. Now there's lots of different operating systems out there. Right now I'm using Windows 10. How do I know I'm using Windows 10? Well, I told you? Is that why? Is there a way I could look at my computer and figure out what operating system I'm using?
Yeah.
All right, there absolutely is. And there's a number of ways to get to this information, but you notice I went to my File Explorer to do this. This is my most comfortable way to do it, because I've just done it this way for years, so that's the way I do it. You guys might know better ways or different ways to do it, and that's okay. But I usually bring up that File Explorer window, and then I go to the area of the sidebar here where it says this PC, or if you're on like Windows 8, it'll say computer, or Windows 7 will say my computer, something like that. But the root of that, if you right-click it and then just choose Properties, it will bring up this screen right here, and you see the big logo pops up and it says Windows 10. But I'm going to tell you right now, that sometimes is not enough. Notice the very first little sidebar section there, and it's not the sidebar, the main section. It tells you the specific edition that I'm using. Because there are different versions of Windows 10, folks. When you walk into, you know, your local retailer and buy a machine off the shelf, almost entirely you will get Windows 10 Home Edition, meant for consumers. And that's wonderful because it'll do most of the things you need it to do, but there are features that are missing that as IT people, you may opt to actually upgrade your version of Windows to get some of those features. And you might not need it at the beginning of your program, but when you get towards the end of your program, you start to do things like virtualization. And if that's like a complete mystery to you now, that's okay, don't worry about it. But you're going to ask your computer to do some higher end things, and you can't do it with the Home Edition. It's just really as simple as that. The beauty of it is, as students, you guys get Windows 10 upgrades for free. So you can actually upgrade to what they call the Education Edition, which is equivalent to the Professional / Ultimate or Enterprise Edition. So it gives you all the features that are possible in Windows. The funny thing about Windows is the way they load it up on our computers these days, all the features are already there. It's just a matter of giving it the right license key to unlock it. And then it like unzips it, drops it in, and it's all there. I'm going to give you a cool little tip, and I'm hoping I have this in the resources section. You see I'm saying that a little pensively. Yeah, and see this is a little dated, so I'm going to have to provide the link separately for you guys. But we have a tool, and I'm going to have to go to one of my other course shells to pull it in. And then what I promise I'll do, and please remind me to do it if I forget, I'm going to drop that information into this course shell as well so that you guys have the way to get the software. As students, you guys all get accounts created on this in this thing called Microsoft Imagine. And that has now actually transported to what we call the Azure Cloud. You don't have to write any of that down, you're not tested on it. But it's basically a website where you as students can go and download just about any piece of Microsoft software for free. And we're talking pieces of software that cost a lot of money, that, like, you know, as a consumer you'd pay dearly for them. So it's one of the advantages of being a student. All right, so let's really quickly, I'll show you how to get there. I know I have it in this course shell because they absolutely have to have it. Otherwise they can't do their work. But I'm going to provide this link here. And you know what? I'm going to do something kind of fun with that link. I'm going to actually buffer it in my Notepad++ here. And then I'm going to chat it over to you guys when we use Blackboard Collaborate later. Just as something that's fun to do. But that URL that you see, and if you're quick and crafty, you can type it in really quick. Okay, but I'm pressing enter because I want to move on. So now I'm logging into the Azure cloud. It does require an account. If you try to log in, you will be asked to register. We have our department associate pre-creates all the accounts, usually the second week of class every semester. And you get dropped into the Azure portal. And I'm going to tell you what, this is a very overwhelming environment, even for me, first looking at it. When you land in here, you will land on a home page. And if you start to look at some of the tools that are available, you might go, oh my God, what the heck is this? You guys are basically given access to the Azure Cloud Computing Platform, which is where all the computing stuff is kind of moving now. You can deploy servers, databases, websites, oh my God. But I'm going to give you fair warning. Some of those tools are only on a trial basis, even as a student. And you get a trial, I think it's for 180 days or 120 days, and then the monthly fee of $250 a month kicks in. Yeah. So the cloud computing stuff is not what we're worried about. What we really need is the software. So how you get to the software when you're in this environment is you just come up to the search bar and type education, and it'll take you here. From this interface, you will be able to download some of the key software that you will need as a student. Students who are in our software developer program, is there anybody that's doing both in here? Nobody? Okay. Oh, a couple, okay. If you take the Intro to Programming class, and you probably either have Wendy, Alan, or Saad to do that, they're going to direct you to get Visual Studio installed on your platform. We do eventually use Visual Studio in the web program too, but I think it's like more like second and third semester where we start to use it, and you'll be coached. It's a very big piece of software. A complete install of it takes 100 gigs on a hard drive. So one of the reasons why we don't start off with it is that, because a lot of people don't have that kind of space on a hard drive and aren't really prepared for it. But that's one piece of software that's available here. And then you can see you can get Windows Server and a whole bunch of other things, but if you click this little link right here, See All Software, you're going to get a more complete list. And if you start scrolling through the stuff that's available, it's actually a little intimidating because it's just about everything Microsoft releases on a professional level, excluding Microsoft Office. And it's all free, all of it. Some of it is high-end enterprise level software, but what you would be interested in, and the thing I'm talking about, is this right here where I'm hovering, Windows 10 Education. And if you click that link there, and then click this button, I'm not going to click it because I don't need people like watching this on YouTube grabbing my license key. But if you click that link, you will be provided your own license key for Windows. And then when you are back in this interface, very often you'll have like a link, and it usually either appears like here or over here somewhere, that'll say upgrade to a better version of Windows, right? Now, if you already have Windows 10, you just drop in this other Windows 10 license key and it unlocks everything. If you are running Windows 7 or 8, and I'm saying that because I know I have a few people that are doing that, you can actually consider switching to Windows 10. I think your hardware is probably capable of it, frankly. But they have tools that check for it too. If you're using Windows 8 or 10, I believe if you scroll through here, I don't know if they have 7 out here anymore, but I think Windows 8.1 is here, Windows 8 is there, but not Windows 7. Do you guys know why that is? Windows 7 is no longer technically supported by Microsoft. It's about a 10-year-old operating system at this point. It's really very insecure to use it. It's easily hackable. So if you are using Windows 7, you either have to have really, really good antivirus and malware and firewall software, or get smart and upgrade, because it's highly susceptible to attacks. Okay. The weird thing is if you go into a corporate environment, a lot of people are still using it. And the answer for why is because it still works, right? And a lot of those machines are behind firewalls. That's the why. Okay. All right, so that's just a tip for you guys for Windows. But what other operating systems exist?
Mac OS and a bunch of versions of Linux.
Yes, absolutely. The Mac OS, and I'm just going to type that in, and I'm just curious to see what comes in. Okay, so I got a picture of a Mac and the operating system. So the Macintosh, if you buy a Macintosh computer, it actually runs on a completely different operating system with a completely different user interface. With Windows, we have our taskbar at the bottom, right? And we have our Windows menu or Start menu that you click on. On an Apple, it's the converse. They put everything at the top. And they've been doing it that way since the early 80s. That's how long they've been doing it, right? And I happen to be actually originally come from an Apple platform. That was my first platform. Because back then, those were the computers that worked well. PCs were horrible. They really were. It took them about 10 to 15 years to catch up to where Macintosh was. But by that time, they had gained the market share. So Windows 95 came out, and all of a sudden the internet was on there, and everybody was on board. And it kind of happened like that, and Macintosh kind of sort of fell by the wayside, sort of. You know what brought Apple back? iPhones and iPads and iPods. That's what brought them back. Now, they've always kind of had a small market share. It's usually somewhere between 5 to 10% of the market. But the people that use them are like, kind of like the people who are in the Volkswagens. They're kind of like a cult. You know, they don't give up their Macs. PC people will always say, well, I can get so much more for my money if I buy a PC. Look at the processor and blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm going to tell you what, being a Mac user, there's a different level of satisfaction with the Mac, and the build quality is so significantly better than just about any PC you buy, unless you get up into the $2,000 to $3,000 range with the PC. There really is a difference, and you get a lot more usable life out of the machine. They've made some questionable design choices, I think, recently, where like you can't like do upgrades and stuff. But you know what? My son just bought a laptop, and his machine is like that, and it's an HP. And the reason that is because, you know, you see how thick my screen is here? His whole laptop is like that thin. You know, so I mean, how are you going to take it apart? You know, they don't even have enough room for an Ethernet port on it. You know, so that's just something to keep in consideration. Now, a lot of stuff that people do on the different platforms depends on what your discipline is. Okay, the strange thing is you guys are in a web development program. But when you go out into the field, if you are working on what we call like open source platforms for web, almost all the work is done on Macintosh. So if you get a job, you might behoove you to get a little bit familiar with Macs so you don't freak out to them. And the reason is they are really built to do multimedia much better than PCs are natively. You don't have to add on video cards and sound cards and stuff like that. The platform just has better throughput and processing for those types of things, and arguably, I think a smoother workflow. However, the majority of the world, and yes, a lot of web development work now too is being done on PCs, especially on more of the corporate or enterprise level, meaning the places that give you a job, like in a traditional environment. So the real smart play, frankly, folks, is to be well versed in all the platforms. And that's my approach. I think they're all great. I love Windows and I love the Mac OS, and You know, I own plenty of both and always have. Macs do hold their value a lot better though. One of my standard stories is I bought a Mac G4 back in like 1999 and I paid like $2,500 or so, and that was a lot of money back then. And it had a beautiful 23-inch cinema display, right? 13 years later, I sold the whole system. I got like $300 just for the display, and I got $200 for the CPU or the box. 14 years later, try that with a PC. That's not happening. So, you know why? Because people still use them, and I was able to get 4 gigs of RAM in a machine that came from the 90s. You could never do that with a PC. And the reason is the architecture of the Mac is just superior. They had 64-bit processors when PCs were using 32-bit. All right, but there is another major category of operating system called Linux, right? And Linux is actually a free version, generally speaking, of a different operating system called Unix. And Unix is really important to web developers because Unix is the operating system that mirrored the development of the internet. In fact, what was unique about Unix was the fact that it was built to network. And that's pretty profound. So they created this operating system to run on computer platforms so those computers could talk to each other. And Unix came out roughly a little bit before the internet was wired up. And then the development of Unix and the internet kind of went hand in hand all the way through the 70s. And then by the end of the 70s and early 80s, some people were a little frustrated with Unix because it started to become proprietary and locked down. And so they started to create their own free version in their spare time, and they would share it with the internet and share it with other developers. And they also came up with this approach where instead of keeping the code private and selling it to people, they were like, well, here it is, check it out. And then people would download it, look at it, and go, hey, I really like it, but let's fix this part over here. Here's the fix, next day. And you get like thousands of people doing that, and all of a sudden Linux has propelled to the point where it has like knocked down some of the big IT giants, and I think Microsoft is next, folks. I just saw an article 2 days ago about how Windows 11 potentially might have a Linux kernel. In fact, Microsoft already has a working Linux kernel, and they keep adding Linux tools to their operating system. Now that's not unusual because Macintosh kind of did the same thing. They went through this development stream where in the early 80s they had the Mac OS, and they kept that going up until like the mid to late 90s to OS 9. And then Steve Jobs had left the company for a while, and then when he came back from his company, he decided to build his operating system on top of Unix, or Linux kernel, and then from there put a friendly interface over it. And when he came back to Macintosh, he convinced them that that was what to do with the Mac operating system, and that's why the Mac operating system is rock solid. And to this day, all the new platforms that come out, Android, iOS, your gaming systems, all that stuff is built on top of Linux. Linux got so important in like the corporate and enterprise world on servers that it really has knocked down big companies, even like IBM, who had their own operating system on servers, got forced to offer Linux on their machines because people weren't buying their machines because they weren't offering Linux. So you're going to see a different kind of future. That's actually the operating system of the future, folks. And whether or not Windows ports over to it, my prediction is that they will. It's just going to be a different face on top of what's underneath. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. Now, I did talk really quickly about iOS and Android. Like most of us have phones that are running those operating systems. And then with that underpinning that they are also Linux operating systems. So it's kind of interesting. All right, enough on platforms. Let's go back to our topics here. Now we're going to talk about file management. And I know that we've done a little bit of this, and I know Wendy's probably done a little bit of this with you too. and that's perfectly fine. But I want to reinforce some really key things. Because as students, it really becomes important as you start to take a lot of classes simultaneously that you start to get organized. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, as you become an adult and all of a sudden, you know, you have to like sort your paperwork. You know, you get your bills, you know, legal documents, insurance papers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have to know where the stuff is. And the way you do it is files and folders, and you put it in a cabinet where you know it's safe, right? But now we're moving into an electronic world. In the electronic world, you still have to have some level of organization. The unfortunate thing is our operating systems tend to dumb things down for us because, you know what, not everybody's an IT professional, frankly, right? So if I like, you know, bring up a program like Microsoft Word and I go to save a file, where does it normally put it?
On the computer?
Yeah, on the computer, okay, yeah. Yes, that is correct, technically. You know, typically it'll try to put it in your documents folder, or if you're using a cloud version of the software, so if you use like Office 365, for example, it tries to put it on your OneDrive, which is kind of a new strategy. Both strategies are good, right? Because that way, if you ever like need to move your stuff from one computer system to another, you kind of know that everything's in your documents folder. And yes, I have some stuff in here, but you know, frankly, most of the stuff that's in here is stuff that the programs put in there. I really don't put stuff in here anymore. That's kind of weird. It's a total change of paradigm from where I was at like 10, 15 years ago. What I would do is, I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let's put it in the documents folder, and I would build these big, robust folder structures. So like, you know, personal stuff, family stuff, you know, bills, work stuff, HTML, programming code, games, you know, etc. I'm sure your hard drives, I mean, you can see I got Battlefield in there or whatever. But that's not really the point here. The point is, wherever you choose to put the files, you need to know where they are, and you need to know that they're safe, right? And you need to be able to find them without having to like drive yourself crazy looking for them. Both the Mac OS and the Windows operating system have this sort of like recent file or quick access list. So if like you click on that, it shows you like some of your more common folders at the top, the ones that you use often, and then stuff that you've been working with most recently, right? Yeah, I downloaded Captain Marvel last night. I was watching, I didn't get all the way through it, I fell asleep. But you get the point, right? So if I was looking to find that, I wouldn't even have to navigate my file system. Wherever it happened to put it, I could go and find it. And they do that on purpose because not everybody really stores a lot of files on their computer. Frankly, most consumers, what do they do with their computer? They get up on YouTube, they go to Facebook or Instagram or one of those types of things, you know, maybe they send an email and maybe they type up a document. And that's kind of it. You think about that. Think about most of the people you know that use computers. The difference comes in when you go into the workplace, or if you just kind of have the natural drive to work with higher level software, whether graphic software, music software, gaming software, and then you, out of necessity, have to figure out where stuff is, and then you start to get it about file management. And what impresses me, for example, is I look at my son, who's like into building his own system, you know, gaming, photography, you know, all that kind of stuff. He totally gets file structure. My daughter, conversely, all she does is use like a couple of graphics programs and YouTube. You know, it's kind of, she falls into that category, and she gets lost. She doesn't know where her files are located. And even though we try to show her, there's kind of a little bit of a disconnect. She's pretty young still, so I think she has time to figure it out, so I'm not like worried about it. But I think it's an essential skill, really, for going into the modern workplace, frankly. So here's the strategy I'd like you to try to use. Wherever you choose to put the stuff on your machine, know where it's at. You know where I save files most often? Onto my desktop. Now that comes from like a Macintosh approach, right? And the reason is, I think of my desktop as kind of like I'm sitting in front of my desk, you know, and I come in with a piece of paper and I throw it on there because I'm working on it, right? And I might get a couple of piles going, you know, bills, you know, homework, whatever. And then eventually I decide, well, okay, it's time to organize this stuff. And then I take it and I put it into like my file cabinet for long-term storage. When I do work stuff, though, I don't work that way. Sometimes I do throw stuff on the desktop. Like if I'm here in class, I might just throw stuff up there just to get it somewhere. But for work, I tend to use my cloud storage. So I have actually a separate drive letter on my machine, which is my Google Drive. And then take a look at my folder structure. It's a little overwhelming, frankly. And notice I have you know, separate folders. So I'm department chair, so I have a chair folder, and then I have a faculty folder, and then et cetera. I even have a folder for sorting things. I don't know where to put it yet, so I just throw it in there. Right? On my desktop, I do something even sillier. And this comes from working, frankly, with, you know, like a traditional desk environment. You see these two? See what I call them? Keep, toss. So every once in a while, you get somebody who's like, man, why do you have so many icons in your desktop? So I'm like, oh, what icons? And I just grab them all, throw them in the keep folder, and worry about them later. Right? And typically, a lot of the stuff I put on my desktop, frankly, I usually end up throwing out anyhow. Right? Like I put like the videos I record for class go on the desktop. After I upload them to YouTube, I toss them. There's no reason to save them. YouTube's got them. Right? Why waste the disk space? But for whatever it is, I might recommend that for you guys, you might actually opt to use your documents folder and then create a folder for Gateway. And then if you look at the little graphic we have in the course shell with the file management assignment, you might choose to do something like this for these two classes. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. But this makes a lot of sense, right? You should make one for the class you're in, and then if there's divisions of instruction, whether it's a chapter or a unit or whatever, create a folder for it, and then whatever you create relative to it, put it in there. That's local storage. It's on your hard drive. It's also okay to actually just use your Google Drive instead. So if you want to use the cloud-based version, so you notice I'm logging into my email to get there, and then I go up to the little waffle icon, right? That's the official name that Google calls it, the waffle icon, just so you know. And then you click on your drive, and then you can create your folder structure here. And it's not that hard to do. You just come up here, say new, folder, you know, call it Gateway. Hopefully I don't have one called Gateway already. Go inside there, create another new folder, call it Web Orientation, etc. The beauty of like working with it through the browser is you can totally drag and drop between your file system. So I can just take files and just drag them right in, and then when I go in there, guess what? They're there. Isn't that cool? Unfortunately, you can't go the other direction, by the way. You can't drag it out. Browsers don't allow for that, but you can right-click and then choose download, wherever that's listed on here. Of course, it's off the screen. Right, it's right here. And you can download it back to your machine. One advantage of working inside the Google Drive, folks, is this. For a lot of students, they just opt to do all of their document creation right inside that environment. So if I'm inside my web orientation folder, I can go to Google Docs, create a new document, you know, type up my stuff. You know, the beauty of it, I don't even have to hit save, right? If I close it, where is it? What's that? Yeah, it's in the drive. I was expecting it to pop up there, but maybe it just didn't refresh fast enough. There it is. And it's saved. The problem with this is that Google Doc format is not one that you can upload to Blackboard and have it work. So what you have to what you have to do is go to the File menu and just choose Word Doc. And then when you do that, do you see it drop down into the bottom bar of Chrome there? And there it is, and then you can take that one and turn it in for your assignment. Google Docs now is able to actually live edit Word documents without converting them to the Google format. But the other thing you should know is if you use Microsoft Office and 365, which is also available to you free as students, that allows you to also do the same kind of collaborative stuff you do in Google Docs. Gateway doesn't push it though, because we had kind of a bad experience with some Microsoft email products about a decade ago, and so they moved over to Google. But just so you know that. All right, we're going to show some of the collaborative features of working in Google Docs as we kind of travel down the road, but that's kind of enough for right now. Really the focus here is file and folder organization, folks. Now, one helpful tip as you work in Google Drive, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually log into my personal Google Drive, and I'm doing this with a reason. All right. And I'm hoping to see like a little thing pop up on my screen, but I don't see it popping up. All right, well, it's not popping up. But anyhow, and maybe it's because I have this. Some of you might log into your Google Drive like this, and down here somewhere, it'll say, install Google Drive or Google Drive Tools or something like that. I highly recommend it, because what that will do for you is it takes and creates a folder on your machine that looks like a regular folder. So you work with it just like you do your documents folder, and then that will automatically take whatever you put in that Drive folder, as long as you're connected to the internet, that's kind of the catch. It moves it up to the Google Cloud, and then any of your other devices that are also logged into that same account the same way, get the file automatically. Now I think that's cool. And you know what? It's a great peace of mind. It's like a double safety backup mechanism, and I highly recommend trying it. Here at Gateway we use more the corporate version of this. So I have that basically on my machine. That's why I have a G drive, but none of the files technically reside on my hard drive. They're all in the cloud. So it does require that I'm connected. If there's files I know I need to work with offline, I can flip a little switch on it and tell it to work offline. And then when I go back online, it syncs. All right. Any questions on the file management piece, guys? You guys good? All right. We're going to move on to our last topic for the day. Oh, and let's talk about the homework for that. I have some step-by-steps here. And remember, you don't have to make it look exactly like this, but I think this is a good structure, right? I think it's clear, it's well labeled, and it just so happens that, that's how I structure my stuff typically for these courses. And it also mimics the folder structure you see, right inside of Blackboard. That's the same approach, right? Okay. Back over to the course, and then to our last activity here. And I want to point out a couple of things. Now, I did provide here a couple of links. The first link that you see embedded here is the help section within Blackboard for the tool that we're about to explore called Blackboard Collaborate. It's kind of like Google Hangouts. It's screen sharing, interaction, online meeting room software. And then there's also a video here that you can watch if you're interested that shows it in action and all the cool little things you can do. But what I want to do right now is I want to get everybody here in the classroom into this environment. For those of you using your own machines, and I see that a good majority of you are, you will want to use either Chrome or Firefox. Sorry, the Microsoft products just don't work. Edge will not work. It doesn't have the right plugin support. Internet Explorer, well, that might work, but oh my God, don't. As one of my neighbors calls it, Internet Exploder, which I think is very funny. Okay, so Chrome or Firefox are your preferred tools, but on first use, you must know that you may have to install at least 2 plugins to make it work. So some of you may have already done this in your other classes, but if this is like your first semester, first class, you're not taking any other classes, chances are you haven't done this at all. The other thing I'll tell you is if you've used Google Hangouts and you've shared screens with people, you might already have the plugins. So you're fine. Okay. Now, depending on which of the 2 browsers you use, the notifications for installing the plugins will be slightly different. Sometimes you actually have to kind of go to the address bar up here, and there'll be like little flags that pop up, and you'll maybe never see them. In fact, I remember the first time I think I did it in Firefox, and I'm like, what the heck? And then a student pointed out, oh yeah, duh, there's a little red thing up here. I should click on it, right? Because you're just not looking at it. Okay, so I'm going to take us now to the home page of the course shell. One of the standard things I do, and I am an oddity, frankly, folks, here with most instructors. Most instructors don't land you on a home page within Blackboard. You go to announcements or whatever they deem is better for you. At the top of all my course shells, I put a link to Blackboard Collaborate because I use it that often in class. It's an essential tool, especially when we start to get into hybrid courses where your face-to-face section is tied into an online section. And I have online students literally on the other side of the country that want to be part of Class Live, and this is the tool we use to bring them in. This is also the tool I use if you are having difficulty and you're at home and need help with code. It's really hard to kind of do that through email and phone calls because I can't see what you're doing, right? If I can see what you're doing, I'm like, oh, just click over there, you know, and it's fixed. Yes, John?
Is it similar to a remote?
Yeah, to a remote desktop?
Yes.
Absolutely, except you can't remote control the machine. But the feel is very similar. All right, so what I've done here is I put it at the top of the course shell. Some instructors will actually give you like a link that they drop in on a page, and then some of them will also like list it over here on the side. It just depends on their preference. In the web program, I know that, you know, Wendy, Christian, Christopher, and I all do it a little bit differently, but we all do very actively use the tool. I think Alan and Sauter are like finally latching onto it as well. So just go ahead and click the link, and you're going to drop in to the environment. So you see it's actually kind of loading a tool, right? Now, in some circumstances, your instructors may actually create individual sessions for like certain class days or classroom environments. Not how I do it. I just have a course room that's always available even if we're not in class. And I want you to think about this for a second. If you wanted to go into this environment with somebody from class and work on something, when we're not in class, you can totally do that. It's open. And not only that, but you can form little like breakout groups and stuff. I haven't done that much. But then all you have to do is right here on the sidebar, click Join Course Room, and it launches us into the environment. This is the point where you might be asked a series of questions if you haven't come in. So one of the things you might be asked is, do you want to allow the use of your camera and microphone? Right. So here's a tip. In class, you don't really need to do that. Okay? Because we're all in the same room and you can hear me and see me. But if you're at home, I would say yes. And I see like the fact that people are jumping into the room, you see people are logging in, that means you guys have probably done this before and have all the plugins. If you're prompted to install a plugin, allow it to do so. I'm going to pause the video and just kind of do a bit of a walk around. I just want to see where everybody's at. And that basically covers it. If you completed that activity, you've earned your point. If you weren't in class, you will have to contact me to arrange a session to earn that point. Video ends here.